The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome back, folks. In just a minute, my old friend Luke Norman is going to join us. He is one of the founders back when, and today the executive chairman of U.S. Gold Corporation, which is listed on the NASDAQ under the symbol USAU. And real quick right here, it's especially timely for this company update as we get to mid-year because of some of the things you're going to hear Luke talk about that the market has started to recognize more and more as time has gone on, as you see from this great price chart. In my opinion, even after this kind of a move, it does not begin to reflect the economic value just in the CK Gold project in Wyoming, let alone if either of the companies, as we call them, lottery tickets pay off one day or are monetized one way or another, then you really are still looking at a bargain. So it's kind of like I've told people in recent past about uranium. Yes, if you got into uranium and uranium stocks at the low, below 20 bucks a pound on the spot market, you're really, really happy. But you know what? Even at $70 a pound today, and with the great story going forward, you're still in great shape if you get into the uranium space right now, even if you've never done it before. And I believe that about U.S. Gold shares as well, and for all the reasons you're going to hear. Now, that said, just, the typical word of precaution, Luke and or myself might be making what could be construed as forward-looking statements. So be mindful of the fact that even though things have gone wonderfully for them, by and large, still things could happen to throw a monkey wrench into things, delay this, delay that. Things don't turn out quite as and when you think they should. So that's always, I don't care what it is in life, that's always a possibility. Secondly, as you also see here on the screen, U.S. Gold Corporation was added to my recommended list quite some time back, based on its merits, based on a story, which, as I said, now more and more people are starting to wake up to, and they don't pay us for that. But from time to time, including recently, they will pay National Investor Publishing to do some media work and copywriting and things like that after the fact, and to help get the word out that much more. And this video, of course, is a part of that. And Luke and his chairman, or CEO rather, George B., have both told the story. Luke will tell it again. You'll hear him say this. CK was never U.S. Gold's flagship. Originally, it was a Keystone project, which is a great district scale exploration project down in Nevada. We'll mention that. But that was supplanted about 4.5, 5 years ago by CK. And when Luke brought George B. in as a CEO, and George has been a renowned mine builder the world over in tougher climates and tougher conditions and with less going for him than what the state of Wyoming offers with CK. He brought George in, and George said, wait a minute, this needs to be our focus. This is a potential cash cow. And that's what brought us to today, where the company has now fleshed out a very nice gold and copper reserve with a little bit of silver added at CK. The current pre-feasibility study would contemplate about 110,000 ounces of gold equivalent production per year. The economics are stupendous, as we'll show you here in a few minutes. And now they're taking the final steps toward full feasibility, which should be done, barring any surprises, before 2025 is over. And then the bidding war starts over who is going to finance this thing. And to hear Luke tell it, there's people lined up to see just how robust and easy a project this is. And this I want to stress, even if you've not gotten into U.S. gold before, or if you have it, you're thinking of selling it. I've not told people in a national investor to sell a single share yet, even though we've got about a triple here from when we got in, maybe a little bit more by now. But it still does not begin to reflect what the full value is of this project and of this company. And that chiefly, again, is because of the location, the relative lack of risk that you have in more remote locations in the world, more unfriendly jurisdictions. The company has had the benefit of getting all of its permits from pretty much from the state of Wyoming. They're all in hand. There are no more that they have to get to be able to start construction of a mine one of these days soon. And that's a very, very important box that's been checked in the recent past. So everything is kind of going their way. And again, it seems to me that before 2025 is over and they've got the full bankable feasibility study with all the specifics of the facts and figures and costs and contractor needs and all this kind of stuff, so that their potentially numerous financiers who are looking at taking a piece of this or all of it as the case may be, they'll have all the numbers in front of them. But this is as solid as they come, and it's nice to see something that has made it in fairly short order since George came on to the point where it's at right now. And again, those of you who understand and follow the Lassonde curve, a little bit different trajectory of the curve in this case, but initially you'll get a nice move in the share price once a resource is fleshed out, or usually in the form of a new discovery. But the other big move, and as you see here, and this is a stage that U.S. gold is at, as I see it, is when, holy cow, this is really going to turn into cash. Now the bugs are worked out, the permits are in hand, this thing is going to go into production, and that's when you start to count money, and that is when the market again, and usually more so in bigger investors than in the initial discovery phase. So it's been a joy to be along with U.S. Gold, I can tell you, to this point, and getting to where they're now going to be looking at a construction and development decision within likely the next year, once the feasibility study is done and once they've got project financing in hand. It's a great clean story, but again, incredibly with a lot of upside still as I see it. So you want to pay attention, and you want to do your homework here, and not only with U.S. Gold. But just before I bring Luke on, a reminder that if you're not already on my email list in one way or the other, if you're seeing this video independent of my getting it to you, make sure you sign up, at least get on our free email list, because that way you'll be up to date with all the work that I put out, which in the near term will be an update on my typical gold-centric special issue, which I do once a year or so, give or take a little bit. It's always been very, very popular to help people know what to do and what not to do in the precious metals area and in looking at different companies like U.S. Gold. So, and here is my old friend Luke Norman, who was one of the founders back when of U.S. Gold, and today is its executive chairman. Luke, good to see you again.
Great to see you too, Chris.
Well, before you came on, I gave people just a quickie overview, a reminder, a quick intro for those that aren't familiar with the story. But of course, the main story and the main asset with U.S. Gold these days is the CK project. And even with the PFS, pre-feasibility study that you guys put out in February, it still shows a great project. You still are probably, as I see it anyway, understating what the value is, because even though you bumped the prices up, you still did the base case at $2,100 gold and 410 copper. But before we get into those nuances and what you've announced recently to move things toward development and eventual construction, let's go back to pretty much day one and tell us what first kind of hit you about the CK project to begin with.
Yeah, certainly. And that's kind of an ironic question, because when I first looked at it, I didn't like it very much. I mean, matter of
I
fact.
remember the story,
It's
yeah.
true. Yeah. Yeah, I looked at the headline numbers, the grade, and I thought, that's a low grade deposit. That will be a challenge. And then I went to site, I went to the project, and I was like, it's very close to a state park. That's going to be a major hurdle. Like, we're going to have to go through all these hurdles trying to get this thing permitted, and it looks to be extremely low grade. So clearly, I was not qualified to to cast judgment on CK. So I went to my good friend George B. At the time, he was not part of the company, of course, and I said, "Can you take a look at CK for me?" And really, my intention at the time was to potentially monetize CK to pay for the drilling we were doing at Keystone in Nevada, because of course that was our flagship. Just to refresh anyone's memories, we went public in June of 2017, and our plan was to follow up on a previous success I'd had called Gold Standard Ventures, which was a district scale project in Nevada. I know you know the story, Chris. So that was the intent here with US Gold Corp. So yeah, I looked at CK and I was, let's say, it was less than flattering to itself. So George came in, did a full scoping study. Excuse me. He brought in some of his past guys he worked with when he worked at Barrick. They spent about 6 weeks going through all the data we had on the project. And he came back to me and said, "You're crazy to sell this. It's a cash cow." He said, "Not all grade is created equal. When you have grades like this at surface with very simple metallurgy, that it's a very valuable project, and I think we can permit it." So, he came in, he joined the board of the company, of course, August of 2020, and within 4 years, we had more than economically viable project by way of conducted two pre-feasibility studies, and of course, fully permitted.
And that's great. And of course, George, I know from his telling it the story previously that what attracted him was some of the stuff that you said, Luke, that you can't be in a better place to have first world infrastructure, first world labor, a mining culture, great culture politically and regulatory wise in the state of Wyoming, all of that stuff. So what you have now is a resource after all the work that's been done that is fully permitted. You don't have any more permits you have to get. And so now you're moving into the phase to get a final feasibility study. Those
Mhm.
numbers will be what potential financiers are basing their decisions on down the road. So to recap, the PFS pre-feasibility study you put out in February shows a game plan of was it roughly 110,000 ounces of production for a 10-year period and 110,000 gold equivalent. So you've got the gold and the copper.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
well, look, first, I'm just going to do a little corrective statement. You
Oh, I'm
said
sorry.
resource. No, that's fine. We've got a
Well, yeah,
reserve, is
I
all
say
that.
I'm used to saying resource. Everybody uses the term
Yeah, and look, I get it.
loosely,
I
but
get
you
it.
guys have, being in the US, you're under a different set of rules than the Canadian ones, and your SK 1300, you have to have proven reserves
Yeah,
before you go to
P1,
that next step.
P2s.
Good,
That's
good
right.
catch.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So yeah, no, we've got I like to point that out to people because again, it's not a science project. It's not a science test anymore. It is it's a fully defined reserve.
Yep.
And really the reserve is not indicative of the deposit. And that's something I love to separate. That the reserve is what we drill constrained. We knew we needed to have at least a 10-year mine life and at least 100,000 ounces of per annum gold production to be relevant, right? To be a relevant public company. So we defined that reserve and we ticked those boxes. Really, that was just an exercise to go about the permit phase, get the permits done. But that deposit continues to depth and it continues laterally. So ultimately, it is bigger. It will be bigger, the total amount of contained metals. But in our two iterations of pre-feasibility study, of course, first one in 2021 and our latest one in February of this year, we were conservative, as you pointed out, $2,100 gold, $4.10 copper. I like that. I think one should always be conservative when they approach it, when you're looking at it, when you're talking to investors. Anyone can see the blue sky and the upside to the project. And look, it is in our presentation too. You can see on our sensitivities chart with the headline numbers from that pre-feasibility, just how abrupt the hockey stick is on the upside of this project as you broach into $2,500 gold. We were so we were crazy enough to add $3,000 gold as a glimpse of what it could look like in a $3,000 gold world, and here
Yeah.
we are now at 2,400, right? So
Yeah. It
we
doesn't
can't
look
keep
so
pace with it.
crazy now.
Yeah. But what it does tell you, and this is a big takeaway with CK, because again, I even with a level of sophistication I'd like to believe I have in this sector, was confused by the low grade of the project. And what that gets expunged completely when you look at that sensitivities, because this thing still makes money at $1,300 gold,
Yeah.
It's got an all-in sustaining cost of $937 an ounce. Now, We do think these numbers are going to continually just etch a little bit higher. I think that this post, now what we're doing, which is called a definitive feasibility, or historically they were known as bankable feasibility studies. As we, finalize that into the early stages of Q4 of this year, I expect the number to go up. So the number that I'm referring to, excuse me, is the capitalization that we require to build the
Right.
mine, right? So I think the capex is $277 million in the February report. I would not be surprised at all to see that broach
Oh, sure.
300 million, excuse me. But it's still well left of the bell curve relative to this kind of operation. And there's very good reason for that. And you touched on it earlier about what a great location we have in terms of being in Wyoming. And I've kind of quipped and I've coined the phrase now, the right stuff at the right time in the right place, right?
Right. Yeah.
Lots of rights there.
Yeah.
But we didn't require any federal involvement, but obviously the feds are right behind getting copper and gold production up in the US. That's going to, of course, hopefully result in us maybe seeing some federal grant money. We're toying with talking to Exim right now, etc. But
Yeah.
yeah, we've got a tremendous project with wonderful margins to it, just in a very strong bull cycle in gold right now. So it's fun.
Yeah, and to update the numbers thing is what 70% of the overall value and what you're going to be mining under the present plan is gold, and the remainder is copper, a little bit of silver.
Yes, that's bang on. So I concentrate, very, very clean concentrate. So
Right.
for those who don't understand, what there's differences in gold mining, of course. For us, we don't actually produce a doré on site. We produce a gold and copper concentrate, which is in huge demand globally, just by the by. It's a big business, and the
Yeah.
biggest offtake companies in the world are talking to us right now because everyone's desperate for good concentrate. And we have this extraordinarily clean concentrate, which packs about 22% copper, upwards of 50, 55 grams of gold, and 5 to 6 ounces of silver. And that's in a very fine sand. And that just gets shipped off site, and then that's sold directly to end buyers who, will either end up being at Kennecott down in Idaho or up in
Sure.
Canada, but close by.
Sure. Now, one thing
Yeah.
that you did not work into the economic projections, even back in this last February, was the strong possibility that you're going to get added cash out of CK once you start production, and that would be from an aggregates component where you're crushing
Yeah.
a lot of the country rock around where you're at to strip and to get to the ore and et cetera. And a lot of that can be used for aggregates, for gravel and things like that.
Yeah. And it's not built into the economic framework, as you rightfully pointed out. What happened is during the initial engineering phases, through the first pre-feasibility studies, of course, when you build a mine and a plant and you need crushers and ball mills and you've got to build a warehousing for the float concentrators that ultimately, create the concentrate that we'll be selling. It takes an awful lot of concrete and road base, etc. So we're thinking, are we going to have to buy that from our neighbors, Martin Marietta? They're 2.5 miles away. They have a quarry harvesting a particular granodiorite that they sell off into the Colorado Front Range and beyond into California.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, let's test our own rock. Let's see what our waste materials are like. So we brought in some specialists. They did a number of different tests, which are done on aggregates, LA abrasions. There's a list of them. And then we had to check, make sure it's not going to leach anything nefarious because, of course, it's a sulfide deposit. It was very competent, clean, good rock. So much so that word got out. Then Burlington Northern Santa Fe, one of the largest rail companies in the US, approached us with a letter of intent to actually, they said, look, we want 400,000 tons of that minimum a year. Well, when we start doing the math on it, it's $20 to $25 rock, and we've got 40 million tons of it just within our reserve. 40 million tons of that very rock just sits on surface for free as waste. And ultimately, we were going to cover that with riprap and topsoil it and seed it and turn it back
Right.
to topography after production. So not a good idea to bury 800 million to $1 billion worth of rock.
Nope.
Let's sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, Chris, I'm not going to try and pretend that we're going to try and become a materials company or a
No.
construction company. Not in the least. But we need to deal with construction companies and materials companies regardless, because we're doing contract mining, and those are the people that own all the heavy iron, as we refer to it, or the
No.
machinery in state. And a couple of them have already mentioned to us, hey, we'll dig your hole and deliver you ore just for your waste material. So we're in those discussions, and that's going to have a huge impact on,
No.
positive impact on the economics of the mine, no matter how you look at it, whether we sell the rock
Yep.
or whether we are just credited, work back in terms of that, all important contract mining, etc.
Yep.
It's going to be massively impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I had when you were talking about it a few minutes ago with the different gold prices, especially, I had the one slide from your deck up showing those different price points and sensitivities from the pre-feasibility study. But I mean, you can double some of those numbers with the value of the aggregates easily, depending on how things
Oh,
look.
very
I mean,
much.
that's remarkable, and it's yet another way that you guys really are under promising more than
Mhm.
likely, even in this latest report. And again, it speaks well to that stock chart I showed before you came on. People are starting to get it and realize
Yeah.
what a great, like George said, what a great cash cow, and it's a relatively simple one. I mean, nothing is
Mhm.
easy in the mining industry. I don't have to tell you
Nothing.
that. But in
Yeah.
relative terms, this is a pretty nice project and one with a lot less headaches than others go through. So let's move on, Luke, to where you're at right now. You've made a couple
Mhm.
announcements recently of hiring firms that are going to be doing the actual grunt work and the rest of the technical work to get to the full feasibility stage. What's that all about now? Where you at?
Yeah, so look, George and his team, just for everyone else's knowledge as well, you and I talk about George intimately because we know his history, but maybe some people listening today don't entirely know. So George B, his background has been building the biggest gold mines on the planet, and
Yep.
aside from Kinross and a myriad of different companies, ultimately he had a 16-year tenure with Barrick, and at Barrick he started off as the mine manager at a little mine called Betsy Post, which became Gold Strike, which is now one of the biggest holes in the ground in the world.
Yep.
A very successful mining operation. He then moved his talents into South America and built a lot of Barrick's big production in South America. So to say this gentleman knows how to dig a hole and extract gold would be an understatement, I guess. So when George did our pre-feasibility studies, he always referred to people, this is not a pre-feas light, this is a pre-feas heavy, as in he did a lot of the engineering required for all that final definitive study up front. So we've already paid for all that stuff, and it's a big takeaway here for our company if you're considering us as an investment, especially nowadays. We've gone through all that dilution. We raised over $50 million to get ourselves through the getting in the SK1300 reserve, getting all that engineering done, completing the pre-feasibility studies, and permitting the project. That dilution's been taken on the chin, right? And we still only have 13.8 million shares outstanding. So we've done a tremendous job in keeping this share
Yep.
structure very tight, as I know you recognize, Chris. So now, going into definitive feasibility, we don't have a huge amount of money to spend. And I've had analysts who are, seasoned analysts say, "Oh, what's it going to cost you to get to definitive now? 10 million?" I'm like, under $1 million, actually. And they're kind of, surprised, but that's the level of work that have been done up to now.
Already.
So yeah. So the next 4 to 5 months is now taking all of that work and compiling it into this definitive study that's going to have, pricing on what exactly the footprint of warehousing we need to put the flot cells in, exactly how much we need to spend on electrical engineering and plumbing and all the different variables there. We're going to have those in actual quotes from the construction people that we're going to be using. And another thing, because I'm a bit rambly today, another thing that's really important about that location is we don't have to fly people in, specialist people. We are 20 miles outside of a resource hub that is a resource industry pros from every single facet of what we
Yep.
require to work at our mine. So they're living at home and they're coming to our project and they do, um, you know, a job de jour type thing. If we need something done, great, they're there, the contractors, we pay them for the day, they leave. They're not
Yeah.
sitting around waiting for somebody else to finish their job. We're not having to host them in a man camp. It's a remarkable mining opportunity.
Yeah. Well, like you said earlier, that's the great location part of the whole thing. I mean, it doesn't get a whole lot cleaner than this. So looking forward, what's your rough, if you have one still, Luke, target date for when you want to have that final feasibility study done?
Honestly, we're just giving guidance saying, early Q4.
Okay.
Um, it could even end up being mid Q4. We've been very good with, I think, setting milestones and meeting them throughout this kind of
Hmm.
4.5 year period. Um, but we want to really button this thing down because right off the back of that is going to be project finance, right? We are
Yeah.
actually completing this, of course, for project finance. We could put
Sure.
this into production tomorrow if we had spare $300 million sitting in our bank accounts. And, I've tried to convince you to send it to us and you won't. So we're going to have to complete this feasibility. But, we've already received several indications of interest in terms of funding the whole operation, term sheets from more than several of them now. But we're not ready. We want to have this whole thing again buttoned down, the definitive understanding of exactly everything, what it's going to cost, everything is going to cost, and then we'll go raise that capital. And I keep telling people, and I hope it's not falling on deaf ears, but I think we're going to get most of that, like the gross percentage of that in debt, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
We don't always like debt, but in this instance, when you're a shareholder of a company, you don't want dilution. You want us to
Yeah.
take this in debt because the margins again on the thing is so spectacular
Yeah,
that
the
we can
economics are
get paid
strong
off.
enough you can service that. You don't have to sell stock. And the other part of this too, I don't know if you want to give too many particulars, but you mentioned uh, possibly the Export-Import Bank earlier. I know
Yeah,
that the state of Wyoming has got some potential for coming
yeah.
up with some of this dough, and as well as the federal government, maybe in a couple other respects. This thing is so near production ready.
Mhm.
Maybe you get some DPA money or something like
Well,
that.
it's critical minerals now.
Yeah,
That's new. That they were not critical minerals when we started this. Exactly. So we're being nimble and we're talking to everyone as I quip. Hey, we're open for business. So
yeah,
we will take on conversations with people who again have already offered us terms on building the project, but we're also going to follow a very strict kind of due process, so we don't have any blowouts, any cash cost explosions. We want to know what we're dealing with, right down
yeah.
to the final line items, and we're going to construct from there.
Well, and that'll be the big corner you'll turn later in the year once you do get that feasibility study out, and that's going to be the final piece that I think all of these potential
Yeah.
financiers or whoever are going to want to see, and then it comes time to okay, it's a bidding war. Uh,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
exactly. And you've got the off takers who are
yeah,
desperate for that concentrate.
yep,
You've got the traditional lenders in the mining space, and then of course the banks,
yep.
and now tossing there, as you've mentioned, potentially the federal government, and by all means, certainly some level of interest from the state as well.
Yeah, the state has pretty standardized programs for things like this where they put up a percentage, don't they, Luke?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, precedents are set well before us. They'll put up to 50% of capex in projects that they deem to be fit. So we'll be having that conversation. They do so by way of municipal bonds,
right.
AAA rated municipal bonds, so very low interest rates on them. So we will, of course, be exploring that with them also.
Nice. Well, it sounds like that with it was as great a project with as great an economic picture as this has. And again, like we've said, understating quite likely what is really there. I don't think
Mhm.
I have any shortage of potential suitors for this thing, no question.
No.
Moving on real quick before I let you go, I want to give people a quick renewed look as well at a couple of what we might call lottery tickets that come along for free with a great story in CK, and even after the nice run that your share price has had, it's still not up to where it should be and probably will be once a construction decision is made and people realize that this thing's going to start kicking out some cash one of these days. But
Yeah.
apart from that, like you alluded to earlier, you actually started the company with Keystone. down in Nevada,
Mhm.
where you were able to consolidate. You got a big district play down there, 20 square miles or something like that, right
Yeah.
south of the Cortez complex. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and okay, so again, referencing back to Gold Standard Ventures,
Yep.
which was my previous company that Jonathan Ord and I had built, standalone district. That one was on the Carlin Trend. Well, this one is sitting just across from Barrick's Cortez complex. The Cortez complex is good for about 60 million ounces of gold and growing currently. Massive,
Excellent.
flagship complex there. And we have a standalone domal district, 20 square miles, as you pointed out, the same geology, same stratigraphy, everything there. Again, just 10 miles away, so almost like a little sister to the behemoth. So we're excited to get in there. We're actually doing some work. We've got some geologists in there right now, just doing some surface work. But we do not want to go about really starting another drill campaign there now because there's no point in taking dilution
Oh, right.
at the CK level into Keystone. I think the more likely outcome with Keystone would be in the future a spin out of that for our shareholders, our long-suffering supporting shareholders can get a chance at that project, and we will take on the dilution maybe at that project level rather than diluting down the
Right.
CK project. But yeah, you refer to it as a lottery ticket because I know I do quite a bit too. But man, it would dwarf anything we've done and achieved in Wyoming
Well,
very quickly. Just one drill hole would send this thing into stratosphere.
that's for darn sure. And then
Mm.
last but not least, up in Idaho, you have the Chalice
Yeah,
project, which is in another, really good location. And
yeah.
you might be looking at the same potential strategy with
We
that.
are very quietly, both projects, very quietly in the background, completed plan of operations. Those are a long, arduous undertaking. And because everyone was more focused on Copper King, of course, CK, no one was really dragged through the whole process of us awaiting the federal agencies to deliver us the all important plan of operations. And plan of operations means you can go on and actually drill the project ultimately. And it's a step towards permitting, towards mining as well, ultimately in the future. But so at Chalice, we just completed our plan of operations several months ago. Yeah, and so now it's got 300,000 ounces approximately, inferred resources that we don't refer to much under SK 1300 again, but it's got a really good kickstart there of about 300,000 ounces,
Okay.
and we think it could be quite a lot bigger. So yeah, we're keeping that one in our quiver as well, we'll say.
Nice, nice. Well, it's great. I mean, you wrap it all up, folks, and you've got Justin CK, a phenomenal, incredibly economic. You don't see too many projects with an all-in sustaining gold cost south of $1,000, and you've
No,
got one. And so
yeah,
you've got the copper, you've got the gold, you got a little bit of silver, potentially a huge addition if it works out with revenue from aggregates, whether it's revenue or like you said, whether you get some credit and you have a vendor that says, well, we'll do thus and so that would otherwise cost X, but we're not going to charge you. Give us the rock that's
yeah,
left over. However that turns out, it's going to be a hell of an economic addition. So, even after
yes,
again the share price run that you've had, you look at your current market cap and you're still a fraction of what this thing is worth on an NPV basis, especially if we do stay near these current, metal prices. Even if you look at 3,000 gold and copper is still under $5, we just ticked back over $5 for copper. And I
yeah,
think the long-term price will be even better than that. So this thing is just, it's a no-brainer for all the different risky projects there are out there, folks. This is one that you look at it and okay, there's nothing to worry about here. I mean, in
no.
relative terms, obviously. So,
Yeah. Well, I get
anyway,
asked that a lot, Chris. That's a question that the more astute fund managers and seasoned veterans in our industry go, okay, well, what keeps you awake at night? What is the one thing, the one item? And I always struggle answering it because the only thing I can really think of would be, a collapse in the metal prices and people just becoming disinterested again. And look, it still would be a profitable project. It's still going to create a whole bunch of value, but I just you know, I'm enjoying being in a bull cycle again where I can actually pick up the phone, call people. They want to hear about the story. They
yeah.
want to be engaged. So that is something I do not want to see again. I don't want to see the cycle end too soon. I hope we've got another several years in this cycle. But other than that, yeah, there is a very clear path forward to production and great cash
Sure.
flows.
Sure. Well, it's exciting. I'm glad I got people in back when, and we've all been very, very happy as shareholders. So congratulations to you and George and Ed and to everybody that's had a hand in bringing U.S. Gold to this place. It's great, and I'm looking forward to later in the year when you have the feasibility study out too, and then the bidding war, such as it'll be, will start to really kick up in earnest where people want a piece of this thing, as they should. So.
Yeah.
Thanks much, Luke. I appreciate it, folks. Here again on the screen is U.S. Gold's website. Contact their investor relations team if you have not done previously. And of course, keep up with yours truly. We're going to have more stuff out in the very near future, updating my standalone report on the gold space, #1, but also having some additional information specifically on U.S. Gold, which of course we continue to follow and update people on. And can't wait, and I can't wait. So I don't know if we figured out yet if I'm going to be there in August or September, but I'll be happy to visit one of these days pretty quick too.
Yeah, looking forward to having you there too. And we love doing the site visits. It's
Yeah.
definitely a fun and easy one to pull off.
Nice one. All right, Luke, take care.
Thank you. You too, Chris.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.